Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Yesterday we told you about Donald Trump's tariff war. Today we'll tell you about a twist in the tale. The tariffs are on hold for neighbors Mexico and Canada. We will tell you why. But no respite for China, which is firing back with retaliatory tariffs and investigation on US companies. But this too could change because Trump and Xi Jinping will soon have a phone call. Meanwhile, Panama has given a concession to the US. It is leaving China's BRI. As for Ukraine, Trump has a deal for them. If you want military aid, give your rare earth minerals in return. We'll tell you about the reactions. And the Americans seem to be planning a second Guantanamo Bay in El Salvador, which is offered to keep American criminals. Why does Trump want a US sovereign fund to buy TikTok and flex his financial muscle? A report on illegal Indian immigrants who are being deported on a military plane from the United States. Is Elon Musk running a shadow government with college dropouts in charge? We'll tell you what the US president has said. And in India, an anti-aging fanatic walks out of a podcast citing bad air, saying pollution is so normalized in India that no one even notices it anymore. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, M23 rebels declare a ceasefire. This comes just days before the Congolese president meets his Rwandan counterpart. Last week, the rebels, backed by Rwanda, seized the city of Goma in the war-torn east. At least 900 people were killed in the fighting. Syria's new leader denounces Iran, says the Iranian militias that operated under Bashar al-Assad were a threat to the region. Tehran's presence in the country has vastly diminished since Assad's ouster in December. The president wants to realign Syria's relations with countries like Turkey and Saudi Arabia. In India, a day before Delhi goes to polls, Prime Minister Narendra Modi launches an attack on former Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal, says some leaders are only focused on jacuzzis and stylish showers. The Prime Minister was referring to the alleged lavish renovation of the Chief Minister's house during Kejriwal's tenure. A school shooting rocks central Sweden. At least 5 people have been shot. The police have locked down the building and urged the public to stay away. Students in nearby schools are also under lockdown. Police say the operation is ongoing. And Myanmar's junta bans possible conscripts from foreign travel. Anyone eligible for military conscription cannot leave the country without permission. The junta has lost control of swathes of the country to rebels opposed to its rule. This decision is an attempt to shore up its forces as the battle intensifies. It was called the dumbest trade war in history. Turns out the shortest too, because President Donald Trump has hit the pause button. He has delayed the tariffs on his neighbors, Canada and Mexico. Both countries were to face 25% tariffs from today, but last-minute phone calls averted it. Trump spoke to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada and President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico. Both leaders agreed to tighten their borders. In return, Donald Trump delayed the tariffs. He has paused it for 30 days. And after that, well, Trump is keeping his options open.
I had a great talk with Mexico, and we had President Sheinbaum is a woman. I like her very much, and we've had good relationships, but we have to stop fentanyl from coming in, whether I like somebody or not. They have a big incentive to do. Other than that, we've agreed to talk and consider various other things. We haven't agreed on tariffs yet, and maybe we will, maybe we won't.
Maybe we will, maybe we won't. So Trump is keeping up the suspense. Same with Canada. He says Canada has agreed to secure the northern border. So tariffs have been paused for 30 days. In this time, negotiations will happen. Trump wants to see if progress is being made. If not, he may reimpose the tariffs. The question is this a climb down by President Donald Trump, or is it mission accomplished? It's probably a bit of both. Mexico and Canada have announced certain moves. Mexico is sending 10,000 soldiers to the border. Their mission is to keep drugs and illegal migrants out. Canada is implementing a $1.3 billion border plan. They will also appoint a fentanyl czar. Plus, a joint task force is being created. Canada and the United States will jointly combat border issues. Trump is calling these wins. But the reality is a bit more complicated. You see, in 2019, Mexico deployed 15,000 soldiers to the border. Again, same reason, to appease Donald Trump. But the migration rate did not drop. As for Canada's plan, it is not new. They announced this border package in December, even before Trump took office. So it's too early to make judgments, to say if Mexico or Canada have made meaningful concessions. Having said that, two things are quite clear. One, tariffs will bleed stock markets. Economists had already warned of this, but yesterday made it amply clear. US markets dropped 1.7% in opening trade. But when Trump backed off, the stocks recovered. The S&P 500 closed 0.7% down and Nasdaq was 0.8% down. If tariffs return, this will happen again. And Trump may not like that. He uses the stock market as a measure of his success. He constantly brags about it. But the markets have made their position clear. We do not like tariffs. That's one point. Secondly, this episode could rupture long-standing ties. Here in India, we are used to rogue neighbors. In North America, they're not. They have historical, political and economic ties. But those are at risk now. Let me show you what happened on Sunday. An NBA match was happening in Toronto. The Toronto Raptors were playing the Los Angeles Clippers. Look at what happened when they played the US national anthem. That's not all. Canada was responding in kind. They took down American alcohol from most provinces. They also announced tit-for-tat tariffs. Ontario led the way. This is Canada's most populous province. It makes up 38% of their GDP. Ontario cut off US companies from bidding for contracts. It also scrapped a deal with Elon Musk's Starlink. Now, this was before the tariff pause. All these moves have now been rolled back, but the danger is far from over. Trump could easily reinstate these tariffs after 30 days. He could also extend them to Europe. If that happens, all bets are off. Because the EU is not Mexico or Canada. It is the largest trading group in the whole world, and right now they're talking tough.
We also recognize potential challenges in the relationship with the United States, and we are ready for that. When targeted, unfairly or arbitrarily, the European Union will respond firmly.
He's losing the appetite on Europe. I think this is how we should deal with him, be strong, but being united. I think this is our strength, and being clear that America first doesn't mean America alone, because America needs partner too.
It's now up to Donald Trump. If he wants to, he can sell this as a victory. He can say that Canada and Mexico gave him concessions, so job done, which is frankly the better option. If not, Trump can impose tariffs again after 30 days, meaning more chaos and more losses. Either way, one thing is quite clear. Trump's first encounter with blanket tariffs did not go well. The question is, will it shake his confidence in his favorite weapon? As we said, there's a twist in the tariff war, a pause for Canada and Mexico, but no respite for China. And China is fighting back in two ways. One is retaliatory tariffs, and the second is investigating US companies. Listen to this.
The State Council Tariff Commission issued an announcement today stating that, starting from February 10, 2025, additional tariffs will be imposed on certain imported goods originating from the United States. Specifically, a 15% tariff will be applied to coal, liquefied natural gas, and a 10% tariff will be imposed on crude oil, agricultural machinery, large displacement vehicles, and pickup trucks.
That's China's tit-for-tat move. But the tariffs won't come into effect immediately. China has given the US time till Monday, February 10th. Time to think. 6 days for President Trump to change his mind. So while Beijing wants to project strength, it is also hoping for a compromise. In multiple statements, China has said that it is ready to negotiate. Meet us halfway. That is the message from Beijing. The message from Beijing to Washington. So the door is open for Trump. If he wants a deal, this is his chance. Reports say US President Trump and China's President Xi Jinping have scheduled a phone call. It could happen as soon as this week, and Trump has laid down his expectations.
What about China?
China will be speaking to China probably over the next 24 hours.
On fentanyl in China, President Trump.
We don't want fentanyl coming into our country.
So you don't have to guess the agenda for the call between Trump and Xi Jinping. And in anticipation, China is posturing carefully. Its retaliatory tariffs are basically a message. They're telling Trump that China, the world's second largest economy, won't be pushed around, and that it has the tools to retaliate. This will hurt both the US economy and US businesses. And like I said, import tariffs are just one part of China's response. The second part are the investigations. Beijing has launched probes into many American businesses. One of them targets Google, the search giant. China claims that Google may have violated its anti-monopoly law. So regulators are now investigating. And I know it sounds a bit odd because Google is banned in China. China has banned Google and its products. So how can they be investigated under China's anti-monopoly law? Because despite the bans, Google still has a small presence in China. It offers its ad services to Chinese internet companies. Experts say this business is now facing investigation. Separately, China's Commerce Ministry is scrutinizing PVH Corp. This is a holding company. It owns brands like Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger. It has been added to China's unreliable entities list. Now, what does that mean? Well, Beijing is accusing PVH of discriminating against Chinese enterprises and harming the rights and interests of local companies. Like the case against Google, the charges against PVH are broad and vague. There is no official statement from any government agency spelling out these allegations in detail. There may not even be a real case against them. Obviously, China is not seeking justice here. It is using the process as punishment. These companies will suffer under prolonged scrutiny. They could face restrictions in the Chinese market, and Beijing could even impose heavy penalties on them. As you know, transparency has never been China's strong suit. The longer this drags on, the greater would be the risk for these firms. And if China escalates this fight, American businesses will take an even bigger hit. It is a fact that the US does a lot of business in China. In 2022, this trade was worth over $750 billion. And this includes both goods and services. So Trump's options are quite limited, frankly. Is he prepared for a prolonged trade war? Can he sustain it? Can US businesses handle China's retaliation? These are all questions that Washington will have to consider. Donald Trump was elected on the promise to put America first, but his actions could backfire on American companies. His trade war could choke US businesses. It's not clear how long he'll keep doing this, but we can say that it will test the resilience of the US economy. Our next story also involves the US and China, but this time the battlefield is a third country, the Latin American nation of Panama. Many of you may have followed this. Donald Trump has been eyeing Panama for a while now. The US president is especially concerned about the Panama Canal. It's a critical waterway for international trade. It cuts through Panama, linking the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. The canal was built by the United States back in 1914, but handed over to Panama in 1999. Now, Donald Trump says he wants it back. His reason? He thinks China is controlling the canal.
Now, we had another big thing, speaking of China. China's involved with the Panama Canal. They won't be for long, and that's the way it has to be. We either want it back, or we're going to get something very strong, or we're going to take it back. And China will be dealt with. And we didn't give that to China. We gave it to Panama. We shouldn't have given it to Panama. But Panama, as you know, has violated the agreement, totally violated the agreement. So that's in the process right now. But they did have a very good meeting with the head of Panama.
Trump says that China has gained control of the Panama Canal. This is not true, though. Panama is the only operator of the canal, but China does have a presence there. A Hong Kong-based company controls 2 ports in Panama on either side of the canal. Chinese state-owned firms are also involved in construction projects. They're building a bridge over the canal. And this is what bothers Trump, the presence of these Chinese firms. He says this breaks a crucial neutrality clause, a clause that Panama signed when it took over the canal. So Trump sent his foreign minister to Panama. At Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Rubio met with the president of Panama, Jose Raul Mulino, and he presented Washington's demands. All this took place on Sunday. Rubio was in Panama till yesterday. He visited the canal to take stock of the situation. He also saw a deportation flight take off. The flight was carrying undocumented immigrants to Colombia. Remember, Panama is a key U.S. partner in the fight against illegal immigration, and Marco Rubio acknowledged this. His tone seemed to have softened after his meeting with President Mulino. And we found out why just after Rubio left Panama. President Mulino made a few announcements about Panama's ties with China. He's auditing the Hong Kong company in charge of the 2 ports on either side of the canal. Panama's government even put out this video showing auditors entering the port offices. If they find something, Panama will have a reason to scrap the port deal. But if China doesn't have any corrupt dealings, it has nothing to worry about. I wonder how that will go. That was Panama's first concession to Trump. The second was about transit fees. U.S. warships can now cross the canal for free. This is something that Trump really wanted. He kept complaining about high transit costs, so Panama has given in. This is the second concession. But it's the third concession that has raised eyebrows. Panama will not renew its membership in the BRI, that's China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. It is Chinese President Xi Jinping's pet project to fund infrastructure development in foreign nations, to help streamline trade, and usually to saddle the foreign nations with debt. This helps China with access and leverage. It's a big win for Beijing, but it's proven to be a debt trap for BRI partner nations. Now, Panama joined the BRI in 2017. It was the first Latin American nation to do so. The following year, in 2018, Xi Jinping himself paid a visit. He signed multiple deals under the BRI. There was talk of a high-speed rail line from Panama City to the bordering nation of Costa Rica, a subway line in Panama City, a new container port, and a bridge across the Panama Canal. China had proposed to build all these things, but most of the projects have been stalled for years. Only the bridge construction is underway. Even that could be in doubt now, because President Mulino wants to pull out of the BRI. He says the membership will lapse in about a year or 2, and he won't renew it. Marco Rubio was thrilled with this announcement. He put the statement on social media. He called it a great step forward for US-Panama relations. Trump may like the move. It could address his concerns about neutrality, but we don't know if he'll stop thinking about taking over the canal. What we can say for sure is that this is a blow to China. Beijing has lost a key partner in Latin America, and its companies are on the back foot. So for now, It's Trump 1, China 0. In his heart, President Trump is a businessman. He doesn't understand alliances or rivalries, but he does understand deals. If you give him something, you should get something in return. Not 10 years from now, not 5 years from now. You should get something today. And that's President Trump's plan for Ukraine. He is willing to supply aid to Kiev, but he wants something in return. He wants Ukraine's rare earth minerals.
We're telling Ukraine they have very valuable rare earth. We want what we put up to go in terms of a guarantee. We want a guarantee. We're handing them money hand over fist. We're giving them equipment. European is not keeping up with us. They should equalize. They should really be paying much more than us, but let's say equal to us. And they're billions and billions of dollars below. So we're looking to do a deal with Ukraine where they're going to secure what we're giving them with their rare earth and other things.
You think you've heard it all, but Trump still manages to surprise you. He's talking about rare earth minerals like lithium, uranium, and titanium. These are key to making new age technologies. For example, batteries and chips. And how much does Ukraine have? There is no official estimate from Kiev, but some reports say several $1 trillion, which is why Trump is asking for it. His logic is pretty simple. If the US is arming Ukraine, there should be an upside, some tangible benefit for the Americans. And what better than rare earth minerals? But where did Trump get this idea from? Reports say Zelensky himself. That's right. These minerals were part of Zelensky's so-called victory plan. He wants the United States and American companies to mine them. In return, Ukraine would get military aid. It was a strategy tailor-made for Donald Trump to keep him interested in the war. So don't think that Trump is driving a hard bargain here or he's plundering Ukraine's wealth. He's simply taking up Zelensky's own offer. The question is, how will this play out? In Ukraine, the officials are preparing deals and joint agreements. They are keen to take up Trump's deal. Again, the logic is quite simple. If the US is invested in Ukraine, they will have a reason to defend it, an actual reason, not made-up ones like NATO or democracy. But others are not too happy, including Russia and the European Union. The Kremlin says Ukraine is buying aid from the US.
In other words, it is a proposal to buy aid, meaning not to continue to provide it free of charge or otherwise, but to provide it on a commercial basis. It is better, of course, not to provide aid at all, thus contributing to the end of this conflict.
Clearly, this is unacceptable for Moscow. Throwing underfed North Koreans into the front line is okay, but buying foreign aid, well, that's a red line. Even Europe is not impressed. Germany's Olaf Scholz is leading the criticism. Let me quote from what he said. We should use this country's resources to finance everything that will be needed after the war. It would be very selfish and egocentric to use the money now to finance defense support. Now, Olaf Scholz is usually diplomatic. So these words coming from him are tough. But let's focus on Trump's deal. How feasible is this barter? Right at the outset, there is an obvious problem. Russia controls 20% of Ukrainian land. What if some of the rare earth minerals are in those parts? You simply won't be able to access them. That is one problem. Also, there's a war to be fought. Can you extract minerals in the middle of the fighting? Can Ukraine spare the manpower? If not, will America send its own? And if so, will they be attacked by Russia? These are all very risky scenarios. You cannot find solutions for them overnight. Yes, you can strike a deal or sign an agreement ASAP. But the actual mining will be harder. And Olaf Scholz has got a point. Ukraine needs these resources to rebuild their country. Experts say it could cost $486 billion. That's 3 times Ukraine's GDP. So Zelensky should ask himself an important question. Is he rushing into this agreement? Is it worth signing away national treasures? As for Trump, this is a clear template. His message to allies and partners is the same. If you want my support, pay for it. This is transactional diplomacy at its Trumpian best. When I say US torture chamber in Latin America, what is it that comes to mind? I'm guessing Guantanamo Bay, or Gitmo as it's called. But now Gitmo will have to make room, because the US might be getting a second black site soon in nearby El Salvador. El Salvador is a Central American nation home to about 6 million people, but a lot of them are in prison. El Salvador has the highest incarceration rate in the world, with more than 100,000 people behind bars, thanks to their president, Nayib Bukele. Bukele became president in 2019 and he has transformed the country. Murders and other violent crimes have plummeted during his reign because he locked up tens of thousands of people. But despite this, his prisons still have room to spare. So he has offered this space to the United States. Bukele says he will take in American criminals for a very reasonable price. Here's our report.
Donald Trump's new Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is on a Latin America tour. Rubio was in the small nation of El Salvador yesterday, meeting with their president, Nayib Bukele. Rubio shared hugs, met Bukele's family, took a stroll by a lake. We know all this because Bukele kept posting on social media, with US and Salvadoran flags and the caption, "Friends." It seems that in that spirit of friendship, Bukele offered the US a deal.
We are finalizing it, and I believe the Secretary will announce it. We are announcing a much more important agreement on the same subject, with a much greater scope than those made in 2019. In this case, it is something that the Secretary will say if we finish closing it. It is a much greater agreement that is unprecedented in the history of relations, not only between the United States and El Salvador, but in Latin America.
It seems the deal was finalized because Rubio did announce it, and he was stunned at Bukele's generosity.
President, in an act of extraordinary friendship to our country, knowing the challenges we face in the U.S., has agreed to the most unprecedented and extraordinary migratory agreement anywhere in the world. He has agreed to accept for deportation any illegal alien in the United States who is a criminal from any nationality, be they MS-13 or Tren de Aragua, and house them in his jails. And he's also offered to do the same for dangerous criminals currently in custody and serving their sentences in the United States, even if they're U.S. citizens or legal residents.
So El Salvador has agreed to become a deportation hub, where the US can dump undocumented migrants. No matter what country they came from, El Salvador will take them all. This includes hardened criminals. And not just criminal immigrants, this includes US citizens. El Salvador says it'll become an offshore prison colony for all of them. Why would El Salvador make this offer? For the money, of course. Bukele put up this post, saying that he would charge a competitive fee. Cheap by US standards, but a windfall for his government. The US has almost 2 million incarcerated people. If Washington takes up Bukele's offer, if it sends even a fraction of its prisoners to El Salvador, Bukele could make quite a killing. El Salvador has the space to house tens of thousands of prisoners. Bukele recently built a mega prison in the country called the Center for the Confinement of Terrorism. It can officially house 40,000 prisoners. But the prison director once said that where you can fit 10 people, you can fit 20. So, who really knows the prison's true capacity? There are no family visits allowed. No human rights groups, no NGOs. Just rare guided tours at best. Bukele built this prison to house dangerous criminals. Gang members that had been terrorizing El Salvador for decades. The country used to be a murder hotspot. But Bukele imposed an emergency and proceeded to lock up anyone even remotely related to gangs. The result has been that crime has fallen dramatically. But there are reports of arbitrary arrests, custodial torture, and extrajudicial killings. The prison is considered a dumping ground for people who will never see the light of day again. Bukele is incredibly popular in El Salvador. After all, he drastically reduced gang crime. A lot of Salvadorans feel much safer, so many are willing to overlook state excesses. Will it be the same for the US? Will El Salvador's prison become the new Guantanamo Bay? The US holds Guantanamo Bay in Cuba because of a 120-year-old treaty, which allows them to control it indefinitely for about $4,000 a year in rent. The US used Gitmo to torture terror suspects. But in the case of El Salvador, they won't even have to get their hands dirty. It might be more expensive than Gitmo, but the ability to outsource the torture might make Washington happy.
For a change, our next story is not about Donald Trump. I'm kidding, of course. The man is a headline machine. Even if you want to, there is no escaping him. We've discussed his moves abroad. Now let's look at his domestic decisions. President Donald Trump is setting up a sovereign fund for the United States. He signed the executive order yesterday. It's now over to the Treasury and Commerce departments. They have 90 days, 90 days to come up with a plan. But what exactly are these funds? A sovereign fund is owned by countries. Your mutual fund or pension fund is operated by you, just one person. But the sovereign fund belongs to the whole country. It is money invested in different assets like stocks, real estate, bonds, and even football clubs. And where does this money come from? Usually it's a surplus. In Gulf countries, for example, oil revenue is huge. So they created sovereign funds to invest this extra money. In China, they have a trade surplus. They have billions in foreign exchange lying around. So they too created a sovereign fund. It's just like individual investors. When you have extra money, you will invest it. In total, there are 90 such funds in the world, again 90. They manage $8 trillion. Which brings us to the United States of America. Let's look at two important questions here. One, where will the money come from? And two, why does Trump want it? The money part is a bit confusing. Like I said, sovereign funds need a surplus. But the Americans have been running a deficit for years. So where will the money come from? Listen to Trump's Commerce Secretary.
Within the next 12 months, we are going to monetize the asset side of the U.S. balance sheet for the American people. We are going to put the assets to work, and I think it's going to be very exciting.
Let me simplify that for you. The US government has a lot of assets lying around in land, in official buildings, even in roads and military items. Put together, this is worth $5.7 trillion. The plan is to raise money using these assets, perhaps by selling or taking loans against them. This money will likely make up the US sovereign fund. And why does Trump need it? For so-called national endeavors, among which could be buying TikTok. Trump floated the idea yesterday. He said such a fund could be used to buy TikTok.
And as an example, TikTok, we're going to be doing something perhaps with TikTok, and perhaps not. If we make the right deal, we'll do it. Otherwise, we won't. But I have the right to do that. And we might put that in the sovereign wealth fund, whatever we make, or if we do a partnership with very wealthy people, a lot of options. But we could put that as an example in the fund.
It's a stretch, though. Trump's TikTok deadline ends in April. Can a sovereign fund be created in such a short time? The logical answer is no. But then again, this is not about logic. This is about politics. Until now, no one felt the need for a US sovereign fund. A big reason for that was the private sector in America. There are so many investment firms operating in Wall Street. No other country can match it. 16 out of the 20 biggest fund managing firms are American. They have investments all over the world, so the US government did not get involved. It wasn't seen as necessary. But Donald Trump thinks differently. Let me quote from his executive order. The United States can leverage such returns to promote fiscal sustainability, lessen the burden of taxes on American families and small businesses, establish long-term economic security, and promote US economic and strategic leadership internationally. Well, these are sweeping goals for any fund, but there's bipartisan support for it. Joe Biden also explored this plan. He wanted the fund to invest in critical areas like supply chains and energy infrastructure. So who knows, maybe the Democrats will support Trump on this. And he needs that support because this plan is ambitious.
Okay.
In September, Trump said the US fund should be $2 trillion. Let me put that number in perspective. The biggest sovereign fund in the world today belongs to Norway. It is worth $1.74 trillion. China is the second biggest with $1.33 trillion, but Donald Trump wants $2 trillion. Clearly, this is not just about wise investments. It is about projecting power. Now let's talk about the D word, deportation. President Donald Trump's mass deportation plan is underway in full swing. Over the past few days, he has already flown migrants back to Guatemala, Peru, and Honduras. And now India is next in line. Reports say more than 200 illegal Indian migrants are being deported. They are being sent to India on a military cargo plane. And they're expected to land in the city of Amritsar tomorrow. Our next report tells you more.
The largest deportation in American history.
Donald Trump made a promise during his election campaign. He vowed to deport undocumented immigrants.
We have no choice because that's not sustainable by any country.
Now that he's the US president, Trump is living up to this promise and deporting immigrants left, right, and center. He has already flown migrants back to Guatemala, Peru, and Honduras. And now, the farthest destination of deportation is on his radar. The US has begun deporting Indian migrants who entered the country illegally. They are being sent back to India. The US military has been called in to help, like with other deportations so far. Undocumented immigrants are being loaded up on military aircraft and flown to their country of origin. And now, according to reports, the US military C-17 cargo plane is carrying the first group of deported Indian migrants. Around 205 of them are on board. They will be on the flight for about 24 hours, and they are expected to land in the Indian city of Amritsar tomorrow. Now, this is the first time that the US is using a military plane to deport illegal migrants to India. In the past, deportations have been on board commercial planes. What's more, these military flights are a costly way to transport immigrants. The flight to Guatemala recently cost about $5,000 per migrant. Yet, this is a cost that the US is willing to pay. Though, to what extent? Experts aren't sure. Because, as per reports, about 725,000 Indians are living illegally in the US. They make up the third largest unauthorized immigrant population there after Mexico and El Salvador. At least 20,000 illegal Indian migrants are on the Trump administration's radar. Of these, about 18,000 have been given final removal orders, and about 2,000 are in detention under the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, or ICE. And now, just about 200 of the undocumented migrants are being flown to India. So while it's not clear what will happen to the rest of the illegal Indian migrants in the US, India's position on the deportation has been clear from the get-go. New Delhi has made it clear that it will accept illegal immigrants, but only after proper verification. If they are indeed Indian nationals, New Delhi will facilitate the return of the immigrants overstaying in the US. Last week, Trump also commented, saying that India would do what is right. It's clear that these deportations are part of a broader crackdown on illegal immigration. They are a hallmark of Trump's security strategy. And this is just the beginning for migrants living illegally in the US.
Billionaires often have it all. They have money, private islands, even a fleet of rockets. Whatever they want is at their fingertips. It seems that there are very few things that they lack. So what do you crave when you have it all? Power, I suppose. The power to control other people's lives, the power to decide where taxpayer money goes, which agencies survive or disappear, and who calls the shots in government. Yes, we are talking about Elon Musk. He spent years building a business empire, amassing wealth beyond imagination. But it's only now that he's got the missing piece, the keys to the US government. You see, Elon Musk bet on the right candidate. Donald Trump won the election, he's back in the White House, and by default, Musk now has a direct line to power. Some call him America's first buddy. Others say he's the co-president. Trump has even handed Musk his own department. It's called DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. It has unfettered access to everything, it seems, from classified intelligence to treasury data. Musk knows it all. The world's richest man is now pulling the strings. No election, no Senate confirmation, just raw, unchecked power. So what exactly is Elon Musk's role here? Is he part of the government? Is he freelancing? Is he slashing federal spending just as a side hustle now? Well, the White House has given him a new title, Special Government Employee.
I can confirm he's a special government employee. I can also confirm that he has abided by all applicable federal laws. As for his security clearance, I'm not sure, but I can check back with you.
Did he pass? What does that mean? He's not a full-time federal worker, but he is not just a volunteer either. He exists in a grey zone somewhere in between. Special government employees are temporary hires. Technically, they're bound by the same ethics and rules. They're supposed to avoid conflicts of interest. But when the world's richest man is rewriting the rules, who's really keeping him in check? Donald Trump says he is. He says nothing happens without his approval.
Elon can't do and won't do anything without our approval. And we'll give him the approval where appropriate. Where not appropriate, we won't. But he reports in, and it's something that he feels very strongly about, and I'm impressed because he's running, obviously, a big company. It has nothing to do, if there's a conflict, that we won't let him get near it.
So what has Musk accomplished so far? It's been just 2 weeks since Trump took office, and in that time, Elon Musk has brought US aid to a standstill. That is Washington's main foreign aid agency. He's pushed for mass federal layoffs. He's gained access to classified intelligence. He's taken control of sensitive data on millions of Americans. And most importantly, Elon Musk now oversees the US Treasury's payment system, the nerve center of government spending that runs into trillions of dollars. In a matter of just days, the world's richest man has taken hold of America's financial lifeline. And it's not like he's personally overseeing all of this. His day, like yours, has only 24 hours. How much can you possibly do in that time? So, of course, he has a team. His squad of Doge disruptors. There are 6 people in the squad. Let's tell you about them. The first is Akash Boba, just 21 years old, graduated high school in 2021. Once an investment engineering intern, he is now in the heart of power. Then there is Corristine. He's only 19. His father runs a successful popcorn business. He skipped college altogether. Next, Farritor, 23 years old, another college dropout, now shaping government decisions. And the other 3, well, they did go to college and then worked at tech startups. So half of Musk's team has no degree, and none of them has experience in government. And yet they hold the keys to the US government. Basically, Musk is running this like a tech startup. Fast, chaotic, and controlled by 19-year-olds. And this has left the Democrats up in arms.
Those staffers, whomever they are, now have unprecedented access to the most sensitive payment data in the entire federal government, with no transparency, with no guardrails, and guess what? the one independent watchdog who could have provided oversight, was fired by Donald Trump over a week ago.
And just like the president who is elected to something cannot impound the money of the people, we don't have a fourth branch of government called Elon Musk. And that's going to become real clear.
Elon Musk says it's all for efficiency. He wants to optimize democracy. But here's the problem. Democracy was not really meant to be efficient. It is meant to be slow, deliberative, and most importantly, accountable. If it were any other country, the US would have been up in arms. It would have sanctioned them. The US has invaded countries for far less. So this would have been a red flag. But now that it's America itself, they've dubbed it as innovation. Supporters say Elon Musk is optimizing democracy. Critics say he's subverting it by taking power with no election and no oversight. Let's see if it features in the next democracy index, the kind that talks about backsliding and fledgling democracies in the global south. Will it question the Trump-Musk presidency in America? Next week is a big one for Paris. It's hosting the two-day AI Action Summit. This comes at a crucial time. China's DeepSeek has taken the AI world by storm. The rules have changed. So this new summit has one goal: to make sure AI is accessible to all. Of course, France is chairing the summit, but co-chairing it is India. New Delhi wants its own AI model, and it's leaving no stone unturned for that. From investments to cheap computing facilities, India is offering all of it. And a crucial aspect of it is data centers. They are the backbone of the AI economy, and India believes it can leverage that. Our next report tells you how.
On February 10th, global leaders will gather in Paris for the AI Action Summit, a high-stakes two-day event shaping the future of artificial intelligence. The summit kicks off at the Grand Palais, bringing together a diverse mix of stakeholders: government representatives, industry leaders, researchers and innovators, artists and journalists. Day one focuses on collaboration, ensuring AI development is inclusive and responsible. Day 2 shifts to world leaders as they debate common actions to steer AI's impact globally. This summit is the brainchild of French President Emmanuel Macron. It aims to tackle AI's growing influence, especially the concentration of power. India is co-chairing the event, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi heading to Paris. The focus will be on regulating AI, fostering innovation, and shaping a future where AI benefits all. So India is stepping up on the global stage, playing a pivotal role in this AI summit. But what are the country's AI goals? In the past couple of weeks, DeepSeek has taken the world by storm. Beijing set a powerful example, demonstrating that AI models don't necessarily need billion-dollar investments or cutting-edge technology. AI is no longer solely in the hands of Silicon Valley giants. And now, India is gearing up to make its mark in this space. The Indian government is making significant investments. It's establishing AI-focused institutions and striving to integrate AI across vital industries and sectors. Beyond merely hosting foreign AI models, India is actively driving the development of homegrown AI technologies. It's also focusing on building related technologies, all to establish a solid presence on its own turf. So India wants its own DeepSeek. Another key area of focus is data centers. These are facilities used to store, manage, and process large amounts of data. Data centers are the backbone of the AI economy. If you want to lead in AI, you need data centers. So India wants to capitalize on that. Currently, the country holds 20% of global data, yet only 3% of the total data capacity. So India wants to change that. One of the country's biggest conglomerates, Reliance, is planning a new project. It wants to build what could become the world's largest data center. It will be located in the city of Jamnagar, and it's targeting a capacity of 3 gigawatts. That's not all. India expects an investment of $300 billion in hyperscalers and data centers. This is over the next 3 years, and it's understandable why. Relatively low construction costs and energy fees gives India an advantage as a data center hub. So with these recent developments, India is not only positioning itself as a key player in AI, but also as a hub for the next generation of technological innovation. As the summit unfolds in Paris, all eyes will be on the direction the world chooses to take. Will AI become a force for good, and who will lead the charge in shaping this future? We don't know yet, but India is clearly ready to make its mark.
Now let's talk about Brian Johnson. If you don't live under a rock, you have most likely heard of him. He's an American tech entrepreneur and an anti-aging fanatic. He's 47 years old, that's his chronological age. But he has the heart of a 37-year-old, the skin of a 22-year-old, and the lungs of an 18-year-old, because much of his time and money is dedicated to age reversal. Johnson wakes up at 4:30 a.m. every day. He eats all meals before 11 a.m. He pops more than 100 pills daily, injects his face with bizarre treatments, exchanges his blood with his sons. Basically, he's up for all kinds of strange experiments. But India's heir, that's where he draws the line. Recently, Brian Johnson was in India, and within 3 days, he began to notice the changes, he says. His skin broke out in rashes, his eyes started watering, his throat was irritated. Then he went on a podcast, but he cut the conversation short. He walked out of the podcast, recording midway because of the air. He could not tolerate the room's air quality, he said. Now, it's worth knowing this. The podcast was being recorded in a 5-star hotel. Johnson was wearing an N95 mask. There was an air purifier in the room, and the room's air quality stood at 130. But Johnson just could not take it. If you live in India, this may seem a little over the top. Most Indians would consider an AQI of 130 a privilege. People exercise outside in this air. Children go to school in this air. Babies and elders breathe this air all the time. People rarely complain about this air quality. But reality check. It is as harmful as smoking more than 3 cigarettes a day. So Johnson's reaction to the pollution should not come as a surprise. And needless to say, this is not a good look for India. We are talking about the world's 5th largest economy that aspires to be a developed nation by 2047 and a global superpower. But when the country is shrouded in bad air, it dims brand India. And we shouldn't have to wait for a tech entrepreneur from the US to tell us this or to trigger this conversation. But here we are. India is among the most polluted countries in the world. This is the world's most populated nation, and its entire population is exposed to pollutants. This causes more than 2 million deaths every year, and it has a heavy cost to the economy, about $37 billion. Here, AQI regularly reaches 500, which is considered hazardous. It should be far from the norm. But what's worse is that the AQI exceeds this limit during winter months. And that's when there is some uproar in the country, when it becomes very hard to breathe, when visibility goes to zero, when schools have to be shut. That's when we remember that pollution is a problem. So it may seem strange that someone is talking about air pollution in the month of February when the AQI is only 130. But do you know what's stranger? The fact that we continue to ignore the horrifying effects of pollution, effects that we already know about. Bad air causes heart disease, stroke, and cancer. That's right, it even causes cancer. And this is not just about India. The world over, air pollution is fueling a rise in cancer, especially lung cancer. And what we're seeing now is unprecedented. About 2.5 million people are diagnosed with the disease every year. And these cases are on the rise globally, especially among people who have never smoked before. And the largest burden of these cases is in East Asia, particularly China. How is this acceptable? Did you know that today is World Cancer Day? It is the 25th time that the world is observing this day to spread awareness, to boost action, to save lives. Leaders everywhere are talking about cancer. Experts are sitting down for panel discussions. Social media is brimming with celebrity endorsements. Yet citizens are breathing toxic air the world over. So it's time to ask, when will this change? Because a millionaire abandoning a podcast can only stir conversation. It won't stop pollution. from serving death sentences. Have you ever seen Cantonese opera? It's a centuries-old art form. The characters are drawn from historical texts and stories. Not this one, though. Yesterday's show in Hong Kong featured a new character, US President Donald Trump. The same suit, the same red tie, and the same blonde hair. And guess what? The show was completely sold out. It's become one of the most iconic looks in global politics, perhaps a bit too iconic, because there are Trump impersonators everywhere. Take a look.
Great Britain will make Great Britain greater again.
Oh, Canada. I love Canada. I love it.
Everyone gets tax cuts. Joe Biden finally has extra time for naps.
देर न ला सजना अखा थक गईयां तक तक रात सजना.
And now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. Bhutan's king takes a holy dip and performs rituals at the Maha Kumbh. Syria's new leader performs the Umrah pilgrimage in Mecca, and a tiger and a boar fall into the same well and wait to be rescued after a chase goes wrong. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 2004, Mark Zuckerberg launched Facebook. It began as a platform to connect Harvard students. But the next day, over 1,000 people had registered. Facebook is now one of the biggest social media platforms in the world with over 3 billion monthly active users. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We're calling the show Vantage. We hope you like what we put together for you. touted as the minimum defense from that video. India's neighbors were the first to send the special edition of Vantage live from the White House throughout this week. Yes, Hindu Mandir in we're on our way to Tel Aviv. Pretty measure, but it's also the perfect way to drive.
I don't think that
Prime Minister of Bhutan, Sherin Tagwe. Welcome to
60% of the world's
office. Prime Minister Modi did the iron.
We were actually.
How are you doing? How do you like? It's been 1 year since that meeting. Iron bars separate you from the outside. Out the vote effort. Trump had, it says, and at $4.3 trillion. 300 billion by 2030. That's what we need to tackle climate change.